Well, that special was really something, wasn't it? Ready to follow up on a few of those plot threads that they introduced? Well, too bad, because instead we're going to focus on something entirely unrelated to all of the plot threads that we were teased with in the special. And we're immediately told that we're going to be introduced to someone new, someone sinister in this issue. The cover illustrates this quite well, and it actually doesn't look too bad, with Sonic and Dr. Quack focusing on someone who looks somewhat like a fully crystallized version of the King, but the low opacity combined with how close they are to the front makes it impossible to tell who it really is. It's a nice mystery to lure in the reader, and the artwork on Sonic and Quack is actually quite nice as well. A good example of Spaziante's great character work and expressions, and Harvo's coloring. We open on what is essentially the backup story for the issue, if I'm honest. Sally and the others are working on cleanup around Robotropolis when an unusual craft starts to land nearby. Turns out it's Knuckles, who's come to check in on everyone and introduce them to Julie Sue. Knuckles takes this opportunity to get Sally up to speed on everything that's been happening in his own series thus far, and we even get a flashback to something we didn't see for a change, of Sally attempting to use the fake Sword of Acorns to try and heal her father. Of course it doesn't work, and Rotor, after examining the sword for himself, confirms it's a fake. How, I have no idea. But machines and stuff, and he is a smart guy, so as long as he's right. Sally asks if Knuckles might be able to see about finding the real sword himself, but with everything that's been going on with him, he's pretty damn busy back on the floating island, and he's trying to enjoy what little bit of peace he has, including trying to get to know his mother a little bit better. Sally thinks this might be a good opportunity for him and Sonic to have a talk, as they've both recently had a chance to talk with parents that they thought they had lost. Knuckles is surprisingly open to the idea, and when he runs into Sonic for the first time, there is absolutely nothing antagonistic between the two of them. In terms of the way the comic's gone up to this point, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but my own personal view is that Knuckles' time with his own people has actually helped to mellow him out, at least a little bit. And he's had a bit more experience dealing with others, while Sonic is still feeling pretty nice towards Knuckles after his assistance toward the endgame arc, the two of them acting like they're old buddies now. And then Sonic's father shows up, accidentally revealing that Sonic's first name is actually Maurice, a fact that I am very glad was forgotten and buried not long after it was introduced. After Sonic dashes off after Antoine to keep him from spreading his real name around, Knuckles has a quick word with Jules, the two lamenting the issues in their familial relationships, though Jules assures Knuckles that every relationship has its problems, but it's the strongest ones that manage to rise above that, and we end with Jules inviting him to dinner with the family. Well, that was a thing. Honestly, it's not that bad of a little break from the action, though it doesn't really accomplish much in the grand scheme of things. It's a pleasant little break from all the seriousness that's been happening as of late. It almost makes me forget that Ken's the one writing this story. Almost. Ken's usual issues when it comes to way too much dialogue and flowery purple prose is still on full display here, and there are just some lines that I never expect any of these characters to say, in any context. But the interaction between the characters is actually there, if only a little, so they actually feel a bit distinct instead of being talking heads spouting constant exposition at the reader. Again, Sonic and Knuckles' chummy behavior is a bit out of the blue, but I can think of some implied justification for it beyond their shared friendship with Sally and everything that happened in Endgame, when Knuckles was still just as wary and antagonistic of Sonic as he was before. Art Moweni handles the pencils this time around, and thankfully Ken only did the inking, which means that the damage he could do to the art was rather minimal this time around. Carl Ballers handles the colors, and the art all around is quite nice, with a few small hiccups here and there. Julie Sue seems to be finding the sky very interesting in this panel, for instance, and it might just be the fact that I'm so used to the modern versions of these characters, but Knuckles seems especially round in this issue. Is it just me? I don't know. Beyond that, though, there are some nice touches that I noted throughout the book that did make me smile, and the detail didn't need to be there, but it helps enhance the book's feel. For example, Knuckles' flashback scenes are in this washed-out sepia tone color, where Sally's are all in blacks and blues, which is actually how they've appeared in their respective books so far. And how about this moment right here where Antoine acts as a perfect gentleman and helps Julie Sue out of the hovercraft? Little things like that are just great indicators of the characters and their personalities, and I love it. But like I said, this is the backup story that somehow ended up at the start of the book, so let's move on to the main story and marvel at the fact that everyone's looking a touch more anime than before. And wouldn't you know it, after decrypting the frankly horrible font used for the credits for this story, it turns out that the artist for this is our old friend Sam Maxwell. And to his credit, the art in this isn't as bad as the other times he's shown up in the book, but it's certainly not good, and in contrast with the Mawini art that came before, it takes a bit of adjusting to. We open on Sonic and Sally standing on a hillside overlooking Robotropolis as they think back on just how much terrifying tech Robotnik used against them in that city, and how much is probably still in there. The two of them walk down from the hilltop, with Sally admitting that she's honestly scared for the first time in her life. She's in charge of trying to rebuild an entire kingdom, something that seems even more daunting to her than trying to take down a tyrant, and she outlines the many issues she's currently facing, such as the zones popping up everywhere, the situation with the Robians, and of course her father turning into a big hunk of rock. Jeffrey, however, decides to show up at this exact moment, sporting a pretty swanky-looking hood that doesn't really serve much of a purpose. He informs them that Rotor, Dr. Quack, and Chuck are all planning on launching a probe into the Zone of Silence, and have even already opened up a portal there. Jeffrey says it's to try and once again find a cure for the king, but Sonic is quick to point out that it's not exactly a safe idea. And then the lab blows up behind them. The three of them hurry inside to find all three scientists knocked out and three rather intimidating beasts standing over them. The one who looks like a troll with a horn sticking out of his head introduces himself as Ixis Naugus, and from the way he speaks, he seems to know who Sally is. He blasts at Sonic and Sally with his staff, showing that he has the power to turn things to green crystal with his staff, the same sort of crystal that the king is currently made of. Sonic states that he does recognize the big beefcake with him, identifying him as Warlord Kodos, the former warlord before Robotnik. And the spider following them around is Uma Arachnus, a ninja that we know nothing else about at the moment. What follows is a hard-to-follow action sequence, which ends with Sonic destroying some of the crystal, using it as a means to distract their enemies while everyone gets out of the room. Back with the king, he explains that not only is Naugus his old court magician, but his claim to the throne that he made before might actually be true. Back in the Zone of Silence, he ran into Naugus, who agreed to turn his body to crystal to protect him from the effects of the zone, but only if the king would swear fealty to Naugus as his knight. While technically true, Sally points out that since her father isn't in a position to be making decisions for himself, she is currently the acting ruler, and she says no one is sitting on that throne but her for now. And immediately, the wall is blown open, pieces of green crystal falling all around them. The two guards charge to try and stop Naugus and his lackey, and promptly get killed for their efforts. Yeah, we don't actually see anything, but the sound effects and the horrified looks on everyone's faces makes it clear what happened. Well, I say that, but I'm just assuming they're horrified, considering that they just look mildly concerned at best here. Kodos charges Sonic while Jeffrey saves the king from Uma, and Sally manages to drop the bed canopy on her. But then Ixis gets tired of playing around and uses his magic to transform Kodos and Uma completely to living crystal. Basically the same sort of condition that the king is in right now. When the Freedom Fighters' weapons prove ineffective, Sonic starts taunting Ixis into firing a beam at him. As it turns out, the gambit works. Ixis' power can't crystallize living matter outside of the Zone of Silence, which he knew, which is why he limited his magic to his flunkies and the walls and floors directly in front of Sonic & Co. Now, knowing that he basically doesn't have to worry about being harmed by Ixis directly, Sonic dashes forward and destroys Naugus' scepter, which seems to revert the inanimate stuff Naugus hit with it back to normal. But Kodos and Uma basically turn to full crystal, trapped like statues. Ixis himself poofed away the minute his wand was destroyed, though it's not clear if he teleported away or was shattered along with the wand. Sonic thinks it's more likely the former given his experience with world-conquering baddies and just how cockroach-like they can be. And that is where our story ends. Now I gotta say, we're already seeing a bit of disparity between the writers. Keep in mind that the super special we covered last week takes place chronologically before this issue, and while some lip service is paid to the events of that issue, primarily the issue with the Robians, notice how differently some characters are portrayed, particularly the king. In the special, written by Ken, he was a raving, angry man, unpleasant to pretty much everyone around him, including his daughter, whereas in this issue, he's portrayed as much weaker, more gentle, and dare I say, far more lucid than before. I suppose they could play it off as, say, mood swings, but the difference is so drastic that if that were the case, somebody would have pointed it out at some point during the issue. As a vehicle for introducing us to a new villain, it works fine. The appearance here is pretty out of the blue, but at least they make it into a spectacle, and Ixis does manage to make something of a good first impression. He's loud, egotistical, but quick to anger and overconfident. He doesn't really set himself apart from most other villains cut from the same cloth, but he has an interesting power set, though the rules for how it operates aren't completely clear just yet. And I do like his design, which definitely makes him look distinct from anyone else we've seen at this point in the series. The rest of the writing, though, well, Ballers is still new to writing the series at this point, so some of this can be forgiven as him still finding his footing, but the dialogue in this issue is kind of bizarre. I do like the fact that Sonic's quick wit is on display here, as he learns how Naugus' magic works, and then exploits that to defeat him merely by observing what Naugus does with his magic. I've already professed how much I like it when writers show off that Sonic's good at thinking on his feet, and displaying that he's capable of quick, critical thinking when he needs to. But the way he speaks in this issue is ridiculous. He speaks more like a knight-errant throughout the issue, especially when confronting Naugus, but still with some modern words thrown in as well. The styles clash pretty heavily. Other than that, and Naugus, just because he is so over the top, no other characters really stand out in this issue, though their dialogue is on the same level as Sonic's. And then there are the two other new characters introduced in this issue, Kodos and Uma. Yeah, neither of them make much of an impression before they're crystallized. Kodos at least has some history behind him, being a former warlord of the kingdom, so that could have made him more interesting, just not in this issue. Uma, though, she doesn't even have that. She's got a cool concept, she's a ninja spider for crying out loud, but she displays no real defining characteristics, either through actions or dialogue, beyond her interesting design. Heck, even the way that she's introduced is sort of just a throwaway line from Naugus. So, yes, we gotta talk about the art now. It's bad. Okay, to be fair, Maxwell does put on a better display in this issue than he has in the past. There are times where the characters even look like they have something resembling consistent proportion, though the posing is still as ridiculous as ever. The exaggerated expressions, I would actually say, are pretty good if they actually matched the action and dialogue a little bit better, and his action scenes are just as incomprehensible as ever. The backgrounds are also just as warped as usual for Maxwell's style, though the opening scene outside actually looks pretty nice. Once we get inside, though, not so much. Though I will say Pam Eklund's inks are still quite good, as are Ballers' colors. He might have had a slow start as a writer, but the guy really knows how to make everything look distinct, and when it comes to an artist with as unruly a style as Maxwell's, that's really important. Of course, this won't be the last time we'll be seeing Naugus, but I think it's time we once again shift gears back to Echidnopolis and see how things are going over there. We did kind of leave them in a precarious position back in issue 6, so let's see if that's followed up on at all in Knuckles the Echidna, issue 7. See you next time, everyone.